Good morning, everyone. I am out in the garden and I'm getting ready to trim my lavender. And I've been asked a few different times about how to care for lavender, how to harvest and prune lavender, so I thought making a video would be a good idea. So I currently don't have any productive English lavender because I'm obsessed with all the weird varieties, but I realized this year, like, I really need English lavender, especially with COVID closed down so many things, and so two of my favorite lavender farms that I go to harvest the English lavender for, I use it for teas, and of course I do dried flower sachets. Oh, the sun's gonna blind us any second here. Dried flower sachets, lavender wands, wreaths, all of those fun things, but I really use it a lot in teas and as a syrup to put in ice cream and yogurt and martinis and all the fun things. And in my garden currently, I mostly have either miniature lavenders, so the buds are like this tiny, and I'd have to have like millions of them to use in the kitchen. Or I have Spanish lavenders, which aren't the best for culinary. The bees get to them really quick. They open them up, and so the deal with lavender buds is when you want to harvest them, you want them nice and tight, and that's when all of their essential oils are inside the bud. And they also dry really well that way. They keep their color, they don't fall apart, and when you are ready to use them for medicine and you want to crumble them up and get those buds off of the stalk, it's really easy. But once they've been pollinated and the bees have gotten to them, those little tiny petals open up, and they just fall out really easy. They're no longer, all the medicine's been taken by the bees, which is great. And I love my Spanish lavenders because they're beautiful in the garden. They have a really fun profile, and the bees love them, and that's great. But I need some lavender in my garden for me. So next year, that will be one of the priorities in the spring, to get some English lavender in the garden. But for today, I do have a really small example of what English lavender looks like opposed to Spanish lavender, so I can show you. This particular lavender I've been babying because it was here when I moved in, and it was basically just one really skinny stalk and a few leaves, and I tried to save as many plants as I could that the previous owner grew, because she had some really unique varieties, and there's no way to tell after a lavender's been, the flower's been cut off to know what kind it is. So unless you're like a massive expert in lavender, which I'm not. Anyway, so I kept it alive, and now it's growing in a container, and it put out 2 blooms this year. It is English lavender, and they are technically ready for harvest. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like, just so you can see the difference. Okay, so this is what the English lavender looks like. It's really nice, tight buds. You can see them here. They have not been pollinated. They're all closed. And they're, maybe 1.5 inches long. Successful English lavender will get closer to like a 3-inch spike on it. But you could see that that's all that's in the lavender, and then it has, this is Sweet William. So where's my lavender? Actually, way in here. There's some leaves here, and then it's just wood. So I've got like 3 inches of leaf, and then the nice tall stalk into the bud. If this was a really good example, it would be at this point right here that I would cut them off and let that plant grow, which I will probably do later today. The lavender flowers won't be of much use to me, but I do want this plant to like grow, so that's gonna be my priority. And then this is a green Spanish lavender. My purple lavender's already been harvested, so I don't have an example for that right now. But I did want to make this video and not have to wait for the purple to rebloom. So this is the difference. These are Spanish lavenders, and you could see where the bees have gotten to them, where the flower itself is like wide open, and opposed to like maybe this one. These top ones have been open, but the bottom ones are still intact. This one is a pretty good example. This hasn't really been touched. I'm not really sure what this, that's a leaf trying to unfurl right there, but that's the difference between a pollinated, or this is a pollinated, you can see that it's all open, and a non-pollinated yet. And then the Spanish lavender is, it's this bract that you're looking at. And the purple one will often be like either a light purple down here and a dark bract, or reverse. It'll be a dark purple with a light bract. And it is definitely one of my all-time favorite lavenders. I even have it tattooed on my wrist. See? Yeah, so I'll just show you what it looks like to prune these guys. Okay, so I'm going to prune the lavender, but first I just wanted to make a note that it is the last week of July, and I have a very noisy blue jay that wants to be heard this morning. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me through this. So it's the last week of July, and I'm just now getting to my lavender. It's a little more overgrown than I normally would. Like I mentioned, the Spanish lavender, I don't obsessively try to get out here while the buds are closed, because I mostly grow them because I think they're beautiful, and the pollinators adore them. I see hummingbirds on them, butterflies on them, bees on them. Bees especially. I see all kinds of bees, as honeybees, bumblebees, they all love the Spanish lavender. So that's the main reason why I grow them. If it was the English lavender, I might have been out here a week or two earlier and getting them when those buds are really tight to bring into the kitchen and to dry them. These lavenders won't be dried. They're just gonna, basically they're just getting a prune job today. If you prune them right after they start maybe like 50% bloomed out, you might even get a second bloom depending on your climate in like early August, or maybe like this week if I would have been on time and pruned them 2 weeks ago. We also have had a very cool summer so far, and I'm not really sure if 2 weeks ago, I mean, it wasn't shouting at me like, hey, you need to prune me. So I'm not sure. And now I have planes, so I don't know. It's kind of noisy out here today between nature and man. Anyway, so the deal with cutting the lavender is, it's basically exactly the same whether you're pruning to harvest and dry, or you're just pruning to keep the lavender in shape. Now, if you're just pruning to keep it in shape and it's only the first 1 or 2 years, you might only cut off a little bit off the top and just give it that nice mounding shape. In subsequent years, you'll see that the plant has gotten very large and maybe out of its space, or it starts to get really leggy. And once it starts getting leggy, the bottom of a lavender gets very woody. And if you cut into the wood of the lavender, you may sacrifice the plant. Most likely will. So it's important to leave about 3 inches of plant material on top of the woody sections. And I will give you a close-up shot of that. This lavender has only been in the ground 2 years, but I believe it's a 3-year lavender. When I bought it 2 years ago, it was in a 1-gallon pot. So, and it has seriously gotten so huge. It is a 3 by 3 by 3 lavender. So you can see behind me, this is the lavender. It is just about 3 feet across. It is for sure just over 3 feet that direction, and it's just about 3 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller. So I'm just gonna get into it. You do end up sacrificing a lot of flowers this way, but I feel like it's important to cut them back. I see that the majority of them have been pollinated, so the bees have gotten what they need from it, and so I think it's just important that I save the plant rather than let it get super leggy. Because it's so large, I'm just grabbing fistfuls of it and cutting it back, and then I'll get into detailing it once I can actually see what's going on. Okay, so now I have some basic understanding of what's exactly going on here. Now I can look deeper into the plant and see where the woody stem is and how much further out I can come. Ideally, 3 inches is best, but it'll depend on just how much wood has been created in the plant if I decide to go further out, maybe 5 or 6 inches. So here I wanted to show you up close what it looks like before I get into really pruning it. So I've cut them back, and you can see there's a lot of kind of like gray, decayed material in here, and then it gets woody down inside. So when you pull the green leaves away, you see a lot of wood in there. All of this is lavender, all of this is lavender plants. And then you can see a lot of this, like, you know, it's dead. And you don't want to prune back into this dead stuff, but you do want to remove any of it that's in there that's like sort of just loose like that. And so what I'm looking for is where this green is, that may be a little too close to the wood stem for my liking. But the other thing I have to consider is this lavender has grown maybe a foot or so away from its supposed to be contained area on the terrace here. So I will consider that as well as I'm shaping it. But when I'm looking at the greenery to the woody stem, this is basically how I want it to look. So here's the wood. It starts down here and it goes all the way down into the root system. So you're following it, it goes all the way here. And then, so here stops the wood and we start having green growth. And now that's about 4 inches. And I'm comfortable with that. And that's about where we're going to keep the plant. Like this is all wood. And so I need to cut back into where there's some live growth, like this one here. And I'll leave that, which that's only about 2 inches, but it'll give the plant an opportunity to bush out and branch. You could see it was ready to come off. It just sort of rotted off of there. So, and then as I do that, I'll also just sort of shape the plant. The lavender likes to be sort of in a rounded ball or a mound. So we'll be doing that as we prune. Now that we're done pruning the lavender, it looks like this. And you can see how much smaller it is than it was. And you can also see, you can more or less see through the lavender. And that means there's going to be plenty of airflow for new growth and the sun to get inside there, and to make sure that we don't get any kind of diseases like powdery mildew or something. Even pests are attracted when it's really moist and starting to decompose inside there. So it's just a good idea to keep that airflow going. You can get really detailed and pick out every single one of these, you know, deadish leaves. That's extremely time consuming. I did quite a bit. You can actually see right down the middle of it. This is a top view, and it looks pretty darn good. I'm not going to worry about all the little tiny pieces. You can see if you're up close like this, there's still plenty to strip out, which like I said, you're welcome to do. If you only have one lavender, maybe you want to spend the time doing that. But I have so much more to do in the garden. All of that is going to dry up and fall off, especially now that there's sunshine getting into it and it has more airflow. So when you're done pruning your lavender, it should look something similar to this. Like I said, this is a 3-year-old plant, so there's a lot more wood down on the bottom than you would in a 1 or 2-year-old plant. And lavender experts that I've spoken to, they don't expect their lavenders to last more than 3 to 5 years in the landscape, unless you're willing to just have a lot of woody structure and you let the crown get really, really big, and then you don't see all that woody structure. If that's something that is viable in your garden and it doesn't bother you, then go for it. I've known lavender plants to last up to 10 or 12 years that way. But as you can see, I really don't have the space to allow that lavender to get 5-6 feet around without sacrificing maybe my dwarf oregano next to it or something else, or not being able to walk around and weed in there. It's just not necessary for me, but maybe that's something you want to do. Or you might consider pruning them in late July and maybe getting a second blossom mid-August, and you could harvest again in September. It just depends on your climate. So happy lavender pruning and harvesting.